Hi, everyone. This week, we're going to be talking about this question. How can one balance the roles of a professional counselor and counselor educator? Because you all, training to be counseling educators, are now going to be both a professional counselor and counselor educator. So remember, you all are doc students now. So I don't want you to just take what I'm about to say and just claim that to be truth. I want you thinking about this big question. So in our class discussions, I want you answering this. I want to hear what you think. I want to know just all the things that you can bring into this. So let's go. So first thing is we need to start with what is counseling. So keep in mind that as a professional counselor, we belong to a profession that meets all the standards for a profession and now has done so for a significant amount of time. Where does this come from? Well, if you go in and Google 2020 definition of counseling, you can go look at a peer reviewed article that defines counseling as a professional relationship that empowers diverse individuals, families, and groups to accomplish mental health, wellness, education, and career goals. You can check out this article and look at the Adelphi study that really helped create this consensus definition. Pretty cool. A bunch of professional counselors that have their own opinions on a lot of things would come together and really agree on certain things. Now, in that Adelphi study, which I encourage you to go look at the original source of, you will notice certain words appearing more than others. Words like empower, wellness, prevention, professional, lifespan, relationship, which is why the consensus definition, go back, really incorporates those words. So, what's the good? The good is we now have a definition that defines who we are and a little bit of what we do. Helps strengthen our professional identity, which then helps us advocate to get access to things like reimbursement and help inform the public on what we are and what we do. The controversy is at the time, there were 31 groups represented to go ahead and represent what this means. Out of the 31, 29 said, yeah, that sounds good. Two said, no go. And that was the American School Counseling Association and the Counselors for Social Justice. So let's talk about the philosophy of counseling. What are the underpinning kind of assumptions that professional counselors have? Because you all, as counseling educators, are going to have to prepare the new generation. So the first is recognizing that there is difference in philosophy, right? I'm not going to speak for these professions, but and many times we all use the tools that we're really trained to. So I know many psychiatrists, not all, but many, really, suffering from a biological lens and will use medication to help with that, right? Psychologists, big into assessments, naming what's going on, and then kind of tackling from there. Social workers looking at the environment. We'll talk in a second for what it means to be a professional counselor. And school counselors have now kind of branched off into their own thing. I also identify as a school counselor, but they really kind of believe in tackling folks' academic, career, and social emotional development. But I've kind of come around 5 buckets that really define, from my perspective, what a professional counselor is. Kind of came to these through the 2020 definition, looking at things like HACRA, the American Counseling Association. And I would say these 5 kind of represent our philosophical underpinnings. These have to do with approaching this work, approaching our clients from a lens of wellness, prevention, development, and really thinking about this across folks' lifespan. Right? We don't just treat illness, promote wellness, right? And in practice, we try to do things like prevention, strengths, again, provide that support across the lifespan. The other bucket I think is important is the counseling relationship. If you talk to a professional counselor, many times they will state that what it means to be a professional counselor is the power of the relationship, and change happens through the relationship. So what does this look like in practice? Building trust through empathy and authenticity. The relationship is more important than technique, and supervision and teaching are relational too. So it's interesting because I actually supervise alongside of folks of different professional identities, and they brought in unique things and really helped our students. But one thing that they consistently say about our students at Regis, but I think this goes for professional counselors, is how well trained they are in building the relationship and making sure that they really attend to that. And I think that is a part of who we are. The other thing is that if you look through our ACA code of ethics and you look through the literature, you will notice there is a theme in social justice. The counselors must honor diversity, challenge inequality, that shouldn't just go ahead and listen to our clients suffering. The environment is causing that suffering. We also have a responsibility to help evolve that. So what does that look like in practice? Well, one is practicing cultural humility, really other focused in how we approach this work, engaging in systematic advocacy and recognizing power and privilege and lived experience and how that all plays out in the counseling relationship. The other thing that really kind of is a philosophical underpinning, right, is that we are one profession despite those specialty differences. So shared standards, this is why all K-Craft counseling programs, there are certain things, as a minimum, all folks, and that's why as professional counselors, we really embrace that organization because they help maintain the profession. And, we're seeing this too, that across states, not everyone is saying LPC, but as a professional counselor, we're coming around this idea that like common titles and language will help our profession and thereby help the people that access us. Another bucket also is advocacy and empowerment. That there's this philosophical underpinning. We need to empower clients. So we aren't the heroes. We're not putting on capes. Folks have it within themselves to evolve, to develop. And so that underpinning helps how we approach clients. So let's talk a little bit about the counseling specialty areas. So you can find these in the K-Craft training documents. Take a guess which one is the biggest. Ding, 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 ding. Mental health counseling. But if you go through the K-Craft standards, we actually train towards all these specialty areas from addiction counseling, career counseling, clinical mental health counseling, clinical rehabilitation counseling, college counseling and student affairs, marriage, couple, and family counseling, and school counseling. So those specialty areas are represented within the K-Craft standards. Now, the vast majority of programs are clinical mental health programs. Also know that standards do support these different specialty areas. So as a counseling educator, once you get your PhD in counseling education supervision, you can work in any of these specialty areas. I've worked in school counseling programs where we hired mental health counselors or career counselors to come in and support that program. So know that the PhD in counseling education supervision will give access to teach in K-Craft specialty areas such as these. Let's talk a little bit about answering the question, what do counselors do? What do counselor educators do? And I think it's important to start with, what do professional counselors do? So first is I made this hodgepodge roles, like direct service, indirect growth and development, overlooked emerging roles. So things that we do as professional counselors. I know this is controversial. I'm about to say something controversial because like the purest of professional counselors don't love us using the term therapist because they think we miss an opportunity to educate the public. But a lot of our clients will use that term. So we serve as a therapist, a group leader, a curriculum expert, a diagnostician, an assessor. Those are some of the direct services that we do as professional counselors. Indirect roles are things like consultant and being administrators for programs, nonprofits, record keepers, being a learner and grower, and educator, and supervision is huge in our field as well. And I might put that in the direct service role. Growth and development, also supervisor, but being advisor to folks. And then overlooked emerging roles is being a crisis interventionalist, right? I know folks that are now riding along with first responders and supporting them in that role. Expert witness, being a business person, a mediator, engaging in advocacy, making sure that we're an agent of social change. And lastly, joining involved in professional organizations. So I state all this to broaden what you all think a professional counselor is. Because I think many times, oh, they sit in a chair and they talk to someone. Well, that's one aspect. And these are all the other roles and responsibilities one can put into the role of a professional counselor. Let's talk about counseling educators. Well, as a counseling educator, we are looking at roles like teaching and supervision. So you'll be an instructor, a clinical supervisor, curriculum expert, an academic advisor to your students, and a dissertation chair. For scholarship and researcher, you're looking at being a researcher, a grant writer, a public scholar, a conference presenter, a curricular innovator, right? For program and student support, being a professional mentor to different folks around being a site liaison for accreditation, helping with that. Acting as advisor to folks seeking licensure, so being an expert in licensure, also helping inform licensure laws at the state. Being an ethics consultant, folks will call the university and consult around tough cases. And then service and leadership, things like serving on committees, really getting involved as a K-Club liaison, making sure that we're serving folks on the margins, alumni network, and then also taking on leadership roles in those professional organizations. So that's a lot. I just went over the professional counseling. I just went over the counseling educator. And as I keep going, I want you all to think about how do we blend all these? Let's talk about the counseling associations, because I also think it's important for you all to know that these help maintain the professional identity and also kind of helps give that unique kind of niche that certain folks are looking for. Again, when we go back to the professional or the consensus definition, at the time, 29 of the 31 counseling associations agree to it, right? Helps us bring together, but also there can be conflicts around what do you identify with first? Do you identify with professional counselor first, or do you identify first with the specialty area? So if we look at the American Counseling Association as the umbrella, these are the different organizations that you can go ahead and get involved in. You want to think about where your strengths lie. I'm not going to read all these to you. You can go on the American School Counseling Association and check these out. And I encourage you right now as a PhD student, which ones should you get involved in right now, today? Keep in mind that the American School Counseling Association and the American Mental Health Counselors Association did go ahead and separate. So it's kind of like we're trying to co-parent still. I still see that as a part of our professional identity, but you all, being counseling educators, being in the field, will need to also help navigate all that as we keep going. Chi Sigma Iota is the honor society that represents counseling programs. You'll see that attached to many of the counseling programs out there. In other counseling associations, think about your state divisions, the American Counseling Association, ASCA, and other things. So just think about all the counseling organizations because I do think you all should get involved with all that. I want to quickly highlight licensing and credentialing because I do think it's important to understand what KCREP does, what the NBCC does, and how it all kind of relates to licensure. So remember, there is no national licensure. Your students will be confused about this, but there is no national licensure. It's all supported at the state level. Mental health counselors are governed by different states and by the state legislator, and the licenses are issued by the state. For school counselors, it can be a little different. It can be regulated by the Department of Education, so just know those differences. And there are certifications that our students will go on to get, like DBT, EMDR, EFT, but those don't necessarily lead to licensure. Also, being a nationally certified counselor, they're now asking us to call ourselves board certified counselors, also communicates to the public that we hold ourselves to high standards. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're licensed to practice in the state. In KCREP, right, the mission is to promote professional competence through standards of counseling programs. So just graduating from a counseling program that's KCREP doesn't guarantee counseling licensure. So spend some time understanding the differences between all these, how they kind of are set, but know that your students, if you're teaching, will be confused. So try to help them through. Let's talk about counseling, education, and supervision. So, who is a counselor educator? Since you all are trying to do that, right? Well, I really think we are folks that integrate clinical expertise, shaping the next generation of professional counselors, right? Leading and advocating and advancing our field. Doesn't mean that we're the only ones, but like because we're the ones kind of like helping train that next generation, in many ways, we do take a lot of that. Now, there are 5 domains that can be found in the KCREP standard that you all are getting trained towards in your doc program. So I just want to highlight them. The first is counseling. So as a counselor educator, you're really trying to be strong in your clinical work, in your practice. So making sure that you are still growing in that area and making sure that you're bringing in evidence to that. The other is providing clinical supervision. I think that is something unique we have as professional counselors and counseling educators, the time we spend in supervision, learning about supervision, getting intentional with how we do it. Next is teaching, which is why you will take a class in teaching and like get intentional with how do we teach this? How do we teach professional counselors? It's why I think KCREP programs are strong because other identities, right? They might focus on some other things, but our PhD in counseling education supervision will help you think about how do I teach future counselors how to do this. Also, are researchers, so you'll learn how to be a researcher, learn how you might want to impact the field, and you'll be learning that in the program. And leadership and advocacy. So you will learn how to be intentional with leadership, how to be intentional with advocacy. We'll review American Counseling Association advocacy competencies and things like that. But your program in counseling education and supervision goes and kind of leads to those buckets. So in sum, a counseling education educator is a reflective practitioner, a relational teacher, ethical supervisor, career scholar, and committed leader and advocate. So here are some kind of final thoughts for now. Remember, you're trying to answer this question. Embracing dual roles in counseling. How can one balance the roles? a professional counselor and a counseling educator. I do not want you to just regurgitate what do you, I want to know what you, here's some final thoughts. But again, what do you think? I think that, the counselor identity comes first, being a professional counselor. Really growing and having a strong kind of practice is important to inform your teaching and inform the counseling educator. You need to think about, right, in terms of how to integrate these. Gatekeep with care. I think our humanistic values of like belief in development and the whole person could sometimes prevent us from gatekeeping, protecting future clients. And remember, there's one identity, the two roles. Counseling and educating are not separate. They strengthen each other. I can't help that because I'm a professional counselor through and through. So, in sum, I want to know what you think. I want you all to answer this big question. And I thank you. I thank you for listening and can't wait to read what you say in the discussions and in the course.